The 1980s Spectrum, one of the earliest home computers, is set to make a comeback. Its 73-year-old inventor, Sir Clive Sinclair, has announced he hopes to release an updated model, the Spectrum Vega, which will use new technology but look and feel similar to its predecessors. But will the popularity of the original be of interest to the more advanced tastes of 21st century gamers and programmers? FT columnist Jonathan Guthrie is with me in the studio to discuss. So, Jonathan, for someone who's never actually laid hands on a Spectrum, can you explain to me what all the fuss is about?
Well, Sally, I'm grateful to you for not introducing me as another relic from a bygone era, because you do need to be over the age of 40 to remember these machines. And the first one, the ZX, was the ZX80, which had very little distribution. ZX81 came after that and was bought very widely. And that was followed by the Spectrum, which was really, really high-tech and deluxe because it had keys that actually moved and could connect in colour to your TV. And you could code on them and you could play simple games. And the fact was that their price point was very low, so they had very high distribution, but their functionality wasn't as good as some other machines which were around at the time, like the Commodore. That was what the cool kids had, which had proper keyboard and monitor and all that kind of thing.
But how much of a chance does this product have to whet the appetites of people who've grown up with the likes of Call of Duty and Grand Theft Auto, or is it just going to be a bit of a niche proposition for men of a certain age?
Well, I think it's for nostalgic geeks primarily. If you remember the Spectrum, you might want to have one of these for fun and also play some of the games. It isn't really the old Spectrum. If you're nostalgic for those and the way those worked, you probably want to buy a vintage one off eBay.
I wonder if, because we see technology advancing so fast, this has created a kind of nostalgia for the past that you see in the rise of vinyl records, for example, and maybe that will be a recipe for success with the Spectrum.
I think that's true, very much so. I guess the difference is that it isn't really a vintage item itself. It's something that's been recreated to have a look of one of these old computers, which does something slightly different. It's got a huge number of games preloaded onto it. The old Spectrums, you had to download those from a tape.
But how do you think this will compare with something like the Raspberry Pi, which is something of an updated version of the Spectrum, but a bit more customisable, a bit more open source?
I think that's a very good point. If, for example, you want to get a Raspberry Pi because you're a young person who wants to learn how to code, it's a good entry point. It's going to be a better entry point than this, I suspect.
And what about Clive Sinclair? I mean, he had great success with the Spectrum. He was obviously a very talented designer, but his following endeavours like an electric tricycle were a bit of a flop, weren't they?
Well, that's true. The C5 electric trike didn't take off. One of the problems with it was that you sat in a sort of kind of semi-recumbent position as you pedalled or motored along, and your head was about level with the hubcaps of passing lorries. This did not make it attractive to quite a lot of potential buyers.
But I also wonder if perhaps Clive Sinclair was a victim of bad timing. I mean, now that we're also conscious of green technology and you see the success of companies like Tesla, had he put forward this proposition for an electric vehicle now, he might have had more success.
No, I think you've got a good point there. Clive Sinclair was a great entrepreneur and he was a great technologist. I don't think anybody could dispute that. He was a pioneer, and one of the things that was great about him was that he was somebody who wanted to democratize the new technology, and he did that by creating very low entry price points for his products. You can kind of build a tragic tale of technological potential ignored and denied in the UK around Clive Sinclair. But the reality is that we have with us today, if you've got a smartphone, you're probably carrying around technology that came out of the Acorn computers of the time, who were competing very hard with Clive Sinclair, because ARM Holdings, as you pointed out in your article, was a successor company.
I also wonder, when you see the rise of ARM Holdings out of Acorn Computers, which produced a competitor to Spectrum, why hasn't Spectrum been able to create a modern-day tech success like ARM?
It's to do with chip technology. Herman Hauser, who was one of the people who created Acorn, thought there was an opportunity for a low-energy chip. He went to Intel, who told him to go away because they didn't see any potential for it, and it has happened that mobile has become a huge industry.
Fascinating. Well, thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you.